Hello, everybody. Kurt Risch here, and thanks for joining me on One Shepherd. So today we are continuing reading the New Testament with the second letter of John, the introduction. The early church had its hands full with false teachers. First, there were the Judaizers, who held the Gentiles who did not observe Jewish rituals that they could not be Christians. Then there were false apostles who specialized in attacking Paul's credibility. Later came the Doicists, the Gnostics, and many others who distorted the truth. Each brought their own version of the truth. Second John is a testimony to the fact that no question consumed more time than who is Jesus. The false teachers who prompted John to write this letter were promoting a heresy about this question. This heresy, called Doetism, was the teaching that Christ did not actually come in the flesh. In other words, Christ did not have a body, but only seemed to have a body, and to suffer and to die on the cross. Yet these teachers claimed to be Christians, teaching the truths of Jesus' life and death. John would have none of it. He urged the believers to cling to the truth. Jesus Christ came in the flesh. The word truth appears 5 times in the first 4 verses. John wanted believers to guard against falsehood, and the best way to do that would be to arm themselves with the truth about the author and the date. The evidence is that the Apostle John wrote this letter. Some have argued that there were 2 Johns, the Apostle and a church leader known as John the Elder. But as with 1 John, evidence from the early church fathers identifies this letter with the Apostle. Other evidence favoring John the Apostle as the author of this letter are the similarity of the language and content of 1st and 2nd John. John may have used the title elder as an affectionate description of himself, since his author as an apostle would not be in question at this late date. This epistle was probably written soon after 1st John, for it assumes that the readers will understand what is meant by Antichrist in verse 7. No firm date can be given because there is insufficient information in the letter itself and from church fathers. A date between AD 80 and 100 would fit. Early church writers stated that John was based in Ephesus following the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, and it is likely that this letter was written there. The historical background. The early church made a practice of supporting traveling ministers and teachers with gifts and hospitality. Christians in each church would house these missionaries and provide for their needs. Since false teachers also relied on this hospitality, John urged his readers to show discernment and not to support traveling teachers who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. About the audience. John wrote this letter to the elect lady and her children. This is either a figurative reference to a church community or a literal reference to a specific person. Several arguments favor the figurative meaning and several favor the literal. In defense of the figurative, the issues addressed seem to reflect the problems faced by a church more than an individual. The plural pronouns in verses 6, 8, 10, and 12 imply an audience of more than just one person. Neither the lady nor her children are named directly. Although in 3 John, 3 names appear, the fact that both Paul and John personify the church as a woman in other passages provides supporting evidence for the theory that this letter was addressed to the church as a whole. And you can see Paul's arguments in 2 Corinthians, Ephesians, and Revelations. And finally, the greeting of verse 13 makes better sense when it is understood as a greeting from one congregation to another, rather than from a group of relatives to their aunt. It is just as possible that John wrote this letter to a literal woman. The phrase elect lady makes sense as a title for a well-known and respected woman. The reference to her children walking in the truth also makes sense when taken literally. The greeting from her sister's children in verse 13 would fit this interpretation. The Greek word translated elect could be a woman's name with lady added as a title of respect, as in Lady Eclecta. As for the greeting, Paul forwarded greetings from others in his personal letters to Philemon. So for John to do so in verse 13 of this letter would not be unprecedented. And finally, the plural references in 6, 8, 10, and 12 could well refer to the woman and her children. The proof is not conclusive for either possibility, so the true identity of John's audience for this letter probably will always remain unknown. Yet the message of the letter remains clear. Vigilantly guard against false teachings and persevere in the truth. Christ in the Scriptures. Once again, John takes sharp aim at those who deny the bodily reality of Jesus, the Jesus of whom he writes, and whom he knows intimately, had flesh and blood and bones. He labels the insurrectionists as false teachers, and whereas John often proclaims the message to love one another, he forcefully demands that Christians have nothing to do with heretics. The reason is obvious. In order to have a relationship with God, the Father, we must abide in the doctrine of Christ. We cannot approach the Father without going through Jesus, for John, the person and work of Jesus Christ, affect every area of life and faith. And of course, we do have an outline here, guys. And that's it for our reading of the introduction to the second epistle of John. Thanks for joining us, and may you have a great day, and God bless.